You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number, 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Lance here at Monster 911, the only cryptid podcast that is truly dedicated in helping those eyewitnesses who call into the show share their cryptid encounter and begin that all-important healing process. They see something that is not supposed to exist, but I help them through it through therapy talk and sharing and calling back. I'm not the podcast show that's one and done. I like to call them back. I want to call them back. It is my mission to call them back and help these good folks that people will ridicule and embarrass and never understand, and they'll place judgment on these folks. But I've had my own experiences. I know where they're coming from, so please help them. You can help them by having them call into the show on our toll-free number. Also, that's new here, don't forget to check out our website and social pages. We have various links there down below. Of course, we have a new store. We've got some merch in there, and we've got some cool gifts for fellow podcast fans. So go to those sites, check them out, check out the store, and these T-shirts that everybody's asking about, they're super comfy and pretty cool to wear. The next story is from a game ranger, believe it or not, based in Kentucky. And it's not often we get perspectives from someone who works in the game department. As some of you know and remember, we've had some stories on here where game rangers were actually the ones intimidating the eyewitnesses into not reporting their sightings or disbelieving what the person saw. And somewhat unsurprisingly, during this interview, he shares with me his close encounter with a Bigfoot as a young man, as well as many other experiences that he's never shared before. He also retails of other bizarre happenings that can only be classified as strangely frightening. A truly great guest to have on the show, and I hope I get to speak with him again one day. So, how long have you been in, how long did you work as a game ranger?
Well, 4 years in forestry and 4 years as a commissioner of Fish and Wildlife.
And you've been retired now for a while?
Yes, sir.
So I don't know really where to start. He just said that you had some interesting accounts over the time when you were working. Do you care to share any of those with us?
I don't mind, but...
You can just start anywhere you'd like and just kind of...
Okay, my first encounter was, well, I'll start a little back before that. My grandmother's raised were in the mountains. There's a lot of hollows. And there's a hollow there, and my grandmother kept warning me to stay out of it. And I asked her why, and she said, well, everybody goes up in there and gets run out, especially coon hunters. And I said, well, that's okay. And later on, I was up on our property and up on the mountain, squirrel hunting, and there's a tree had fell, and it was hollow, and when it fell, it left a pretty good-sized stump, and had a gap in it where I could get back in that stump and sit down and watch in the trees for squirrels. And I was about 14, I guess, and caught something out of the corner of my eye. Now, the gap I was looking through was about maybe 18 inches wide, if that much. And I looked up, and here goes this, I guess you could call him a Bigfoot, just walking right in front of him, right.
Oh, wow.
Close. He was maybe 20 feet in front of me.
Oh.
And just walked right on by me. He never seen me. I never act like it. I didn't say anything, and he just walked on by. He was he had black hair, but he had shed, I guess, and his skin was gray. And he walked out on by and went up a steep ridge. It was growed up pretty bad, and it was just like he was swimming through the bushes. He'd take his arms and push back, take a step, push back. He went on out of sight. Now that was the first real thing I was into. Another one, two friends of mine and I, we left our guns at home and what have you. We were up in the woods, and it was in the wintertime. We was going up this little creek. I looked up on the hill, and this was that Greenish Branch I was telling you about. And there's a rock, big rock up there, and it had a split in it. And I walked up there to look, and I looked off down in that, in a hole down in there, and there one lay. He had brown hair on him, dark brown. And I turned to my friend. I could see it breathing. And I turned to one of my friends who's down the creek below me and motioned for him to come up there. And told him to be quiet. And I whispered to him, I said, "What is that down there?" He said, he turned around and looked, and I turned to motion for the other friend to come up. And that friend of mine let out a blood-curdling scream, scared me to death. He went by me down in the creek and gone, and me right behind him. I didn't know what was going on. And
wow.
He run out of his shoes now. This is in December. And we got over to his house, and we got our guns and going to go back. But he didn't have any shoes, and he told his brother, he said, "I need to borrow your shoes until I go get," he'd go get his. And his brother wouldn't let him have them, so he got him down, took his shoes away from him. And we went back, and it was gone. There wasn't anything in that hole. Just some hair where he climbed up out of it.
And it was a hole?
Yeah, well, it was a big crack in that rock down in there.
Oh.
And he was laying down in it.
How old were you guys at that time?
Oh, we just teenagers. I mean, early in our teens, I guess. 13, 14.
And the first time, that first story you said when that Bigfoot walked about 20 feet, how old were you at that time?
14, I think.
Wow.
I stayed in the woods most of my growing up. I stayed out in the woods. My family was raised by my grandparents. They didn't have time for me, you know. And
right.
My mother and stepdad, they owned a store, and he had a job, and they didn't have time. Nobody hunted or fished. That's what I wanted to do. And I moved out, stayed in the woods. Now, as far as anything bothering me in the woods, no. And when I seen that one walk right by me, I never thought about it much anymore. It's just one of those things. Matter of fact, I camped out that night, not too far from there. But
wow.
Nothing ever bothered me. A lot went on. Otherwise, it's a hot spot for UFOs in there where I was raised. See them all the time.
Really?
Yeah. I'll tell you one that was told to me by a real good friend of mine, and he wouldn't lie. And this is what had happened twice. Him and his girlfriend was up on top of this big strip mine. No trees, nothing around. On four-wheeler at night. He said it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. And it stopped. And he was drinking a beer. He said all of a sudden there was a big flash. And he said he was looking, you know, standing there talking to his girlfriend. And that big flash, he said he could see every bone in her body, and she could see every bone in his body.
Oh, my gosh.
And he said, I said, well, what'd you do? He said, throw the beer down and got on the four-wheeler and took off. And later on, the same fella and 4 or 5 other guys parked their four-wheelers and were talking off the side of the highway up where we was raised. He said the same thing happened there. Everybody could see everybody's bones. He said one of the guys run off and left his four-wheeler. They caught him about half a mile down the road running.
Wow.
It scared him all to death.
Yeah, I was going to say, he shook up then.
And there's a hole down there that's got an abandoned mine in it now, a coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
And there's stuff going in now there all the time. Said a friend, fella, said that him and his dad was going up a ridge there going coon hunting one night. And said they noticed something. Said they didn't hear it, just noticed it, kind of felt it. Said they looked up, and there was a big triangle-shaped black thing floating right above them, going on up that ridge. He said he started to raise his .22 up, shoot it, and his daddy grabbed it, told him not to do that, and they turned around and went home.
Whoa.
And another friend lives a little ways from there, and he sees them quite often going in that hollow. And my wife and me, I've got some coal property up there, and people are trying to take it away from me. And we was up there and building a little cabin. We staying in it. We had a picnic table outside one evening. It was on a Labor Day. And I was at that picnic table, was reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
Something caught my eye, and I looked up. Across the way, coming across the ridge, was a black cloud. It wasn't real big, and it come on top of that ridge. It was going just about as fast as you could walk. And there was 5 big old birds. I guess birds, I don't know, come out of that cloud and went down in the woods. I couldn't tell where they went after they got down on the side of the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I hollered at my wife and told her to come out here and bring the camera. She come out. And that thing was just slowly moving. It was kind of headed toward where we was at. And she snapped a picture. And that thing sped up and it was gone, that cloud.
Wow.
And she, digital camera, she couldn't get a second picture of it. It was gone. And we went over to Walmart one day, and she's trying to get that picture developed. And I was looking at some movies, and she's coming down. Well, I said, you need to come up here and look at what we got a picture of. And we didn't have a picture of the cloud. We had a picture of what was in the cloud.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Holy smokes.
Well, and way in the distance, looking west, there was another black spot up there. It was up high. And this one was headed on a intersecting course to intercept it.
Oh,
And,
wow.
Where it went behind the ridge, we couldn't see. They don't know if it went right to it or what happened, but it was they were headed like they were going to meet. But we got a picture of that. I tell you what it would remind you of. It would remind you of a big steeple on a church was inside that cloud.
Interesting. And this was in the daylight.
This is in the daylight. It was in the evening. It was about an hour before dark. It was on Labor Day. They were having a big cookout down the road, and we didn't go. And we hung around the house and just happened to look up and see that. Well, there was a fellow working above our cabin up in a hollow where they closed down the mine, and he was junking it out. And we sitting there at the picnic table one day. He pulled up there. We sitting there talking, my wife and me and somebody else. And there was a pop-up camper sitting there that my son's used. And we was talking about that, seeing them things come out of it. Like birds. I said, big birds. And he said, oh. He said, man, he said, I was going up to the old mountain there the other day, and he said, there was a big old bird come up out of the creek, and said it never flapped its wings or nothing. It went on up the hall out of sight. He said it just leaped up and flew. Didn't flap its wings or nothing.
Really? How big was it, did he say?
Well, if you paid attention to the pop-up camper, the size of them, he said from one end of the camper to the door on that camper, which was probably 10 feet, he said it's about that size.
Wow.
He had that 10-foot wingspan.
Good night. That's
It's
bizarre.
kind of a hot spot up there for UFOs. Yeah.
I guess so. That's interesting. I've heard about that area, that there's all kinds of interesting sightings that people are just bewildered how to describe what they saw.
Oh, it's, I could take you up to where I was raised there, take you you wouldn't believe some of the stories that they've told. And they're not lying because they can back it up.
Oh yeah, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
In your line of work that you used to do, did you ever come across any Bigfoot with you or a fellow officer, a ranger?
No. Probably if they had, they wouldn't tell it. You know, like that one I seen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell it till I got married and had children.
Could you tell me, if you don't mind, because I've always believed the premise that, they here in Oklahoma we have a lot of sightings of Bigfoot as well as this kind of new creature on the scene, and they're really not new. They've been out a long time, but it goes by the name Dogman, and a lot of people are having these sightings, credible people, seeing these things on the outskirts of towns and in the wood line and areas, especially in WMA areas, wildlife management areas. And is it the premise of a game ranger that they don't discuss what people, they don't acknowledge it or confirm?
Yeah, they're closed mouth. If you say something, we're talking about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you say something like that, they think you're a damn fool. People do, what have you. Now, I'll tell you another one. My older son and I were standing outside that cabin one night talking, and every dog within hearing was barking. I know you've probably heard dogs like in a neighborhood all barking at one time.
Oh, yes.
Over on that ridge where that cloud come across, there was something howled over there, and every dog that was barking, it's just like you turned off a switch. They quit. They quit barking when that whatever it was howled over there. It was a long, deep howl.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Had no idea what it was now. Yeah, but we had a place where we burned garbage up on a little strip job up there. And a neighbor took a mattress and box spring up there and burned them. And we was back up there one day, and that the springs were bent in half. They were bent into a V shape in half. And they was the damnedest dog track I ever seen in my life. It was huge.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, There was that big one, and then there was one smaller. But I'm talking about a big dog track.
About the size of your hand.
Oh yeah, maybe a little bigger than my hand.
And how long ago was that?
Oh, that was about, let's see. Well, we've been here in Tennessee 7 years. It's been about 8.5 years, something like that.
Wow.
But it was really unreal when all those dogs were working. And that howl, everything hushed. It's like you turned them all off with a switch. Never heard anything like it before.
When that howl, when that occurred, could you tell that howl, it was a lot deeper, a lot larger volume of a howl than, say, a typical dog would make?
Oh yeah, it was a deep howl. I mean, it was loud too, because that ridge where that thing was at was probably a little over a quarter of a mile over there. And I heard it really good.
Wow. And that was, your son was with you at that time, is that what you said?
Yeah, my oldest son.
Wow.
We were both amazed.
Yeah. I've heard that a couple times where, now when people say their domestic dogs will stop, I have heard that before on other accounts of these howls. But at the same time, what's interesting is that with this type of creature that I spoke of, they collectively call it a dogman type creature. It's a very large animal, in some cases about the same size as a Bigfoot, but it has more canine features. And what's interesting is that sometimes that when these things howl, they'll actually have a response collectively by coyotes just howling and yipping, and with that, so it tends to excite the coyotes, and it appears to be there's some type of relationship we don't quite understand yet that they have.
Well, this thing was something else. Now, where we live right here in Tennessee, I raise a garden. Kids ain't got time; they work. I raise a garden. And we found a 16-inch footprint in the garden.
Really?
And you could make out his toes and everything.
Really?
Yeah.
How long ago did you find that?
Oh, about 3 years ago.
Wow.
And something, it looked like they'd been wrestling in my garden. It just mashed everything flat to the ground.
Wow.
And it was about that time. Now, I was out there one night, and my dog, I got a German Shepherd, and he was growling around, kind of barking at something. It was up on the hill. And I had a flashlight, and I tried to see what it was. But it kept a tree between me and it. And I tried to get where I could see it, and he started jumping, growling, jumping at him. Growling, jumping at him, jump back. And it's going right on around the hill. And it was out, it wasn't in the woods, whatever it was, because he wasn't. He was jumping at it. And it stepped up in the edge of the woods, in a big tree there. It went around behind it, and the dog started running after. I made the dog come back, but I never did get to see what it was. Never did. And we have stuff pick on the house here, scratch on the windows. And the kids had said when they were small, 3, 4, 5 years old, one's 2 years older than the other. But both of them had said that when they first moved here, that bear looking in the window. It wasn't no bear.
No. Wow, that would be terrifying to see that looking in the window.
Yeah, and my son would be up in the garage, working. He got a shop in a garage above the house, and something smacked the wall so hard that a rattle of tools hanging there. Go outside and there's nothing there. Nothing there. And there was a couple moved here from Amarillo, Texas, and lived right over the way. And something, the lady said something been smacking around on their house. And one neighbor, he's dead now, but he seen walking through the yard one night.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I bet you that startled him for sure.
He said he run to get his gun, and he'd come back, and it was gone. But now, my oldest son and me, we went deer hunting this year, camped out, what have you, and we had an encounter. Something come walking up on the camp. He wouldn't sleep in the truck. He's put up a tent and slept outside. I slept in the truck because I have to get up during the night, what have you. And in the night, he heard it walking through the weeds coming toward where he's camped there. And something bumped my truck and woke me up.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know. And I had that happen once up in Kentucky up there. Something bumped my truck at night. But,
you couldn't see anything? Was it light enough to see?
No, it was dark. No moon. Cloudy. It was pitch black. Couldn't see what it was. And I thought, well, I might not really want to see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How about your son? He was in the tent, right?
Yeah.
Did he experience anything around the tent? I mean, he heard it walking.
Yeah. He heard it walking up. He got between the tent and the truck. And there's another thing here. I was out, got a pretty strong flashlight, and was out one night shining up on the hill. There's I guess you'd call it a mansion on top of the hill above us. And he mows the whole ridge up there. And I shined a light up that way, seen a couple of eyes. The damn thing hollered at me. And I took the light away and hushed, and I took the light back on it. And it was like it was walking away, but it was turning his head looking back.
Ooh.
And then it holler again. They'd done that till it went out of sight up through there.
Wow.
I don't know. Well, it's kind of a hot spot right here. Well, it's just a little bit of woods right here.
Sure.
Maybe 5 acres.
I was going to ask you about the topography of that area. You've got ridges, and do you have any steep mountains? What's the terrain like there?
Low hills. Not what you would really call a mountain here. Just medium high ridges, but they're long ridges and they're timbered. Then you get on south a little bit, you got the big ridges running into the Smoky Mountains and Appalachian Trail and all that. Big time.
A lot of hardwoods and...
Oh, man, yeah. I think the woman that owned this place before my son bought it, I think she was feeding the damn things.
Really? What makes you say that?
The frequency of the way it comes, and we got some chickens up the way. Keep chicken feed up there. Well, there's something. See, taking the lid off a garbage can and eating chicken feed, putting the lid back on.
Good night.
Yeah. We moved the chicken feed down to the house.
Incredible. Do you know how
Yeah.
long she had lived there before you guys had that place?
She built the house, and her husband built the house in 1982. So she'd lived here about 30 years, 28,
Wow.
and I believe she kept, there's a room, she had a carport. Garage is up the hill, separated from the house, and she's got a carport down here. And on one side of it, there's a room there. She called a dog room. She had 2 dogs and kept stuff in there. We got a freezer and generators and stuff sitting in there. And kept dog food in there all the time. I think that thing was coming there eating dog food. It comes and, it's been around. And there's a little girl over here come to watch the kids one day, and she was poo-pooing this about a Bigfoot and no such thing, what have you. And she's watching the kids. They's on the trampoline. She's watching the kids outside. Looked up on the hill there. It sat on a log. Got the kids and come in the house, and she ain't been back since.
I'm sure that scared the daylights out of her. It sounds like there's a rich history. And, I've often wondered, because right now I know of a couple places in Florida where, and outside of Florida, where people are they're habituating these creatures. And I often wonder what would happen if the people sell the property or they pass away or something happens where they can't feed them often, and then you have new owners come in there. Well, it makes to reason they're probably going to stick around and tap on windows and slap walls, and they're not getting fed.
Yeah. Well, see, my son, they built his house in '82, and my son bought it 7 years ago, and it's been a pretty, they've been here quite often. I still think she was living here by herself for quite a while. She divorced her husband, and I think she's feeding them. I swear to.
You know what? I wouldn't doubt it. It sounds like it. I wouldn't doubt it in the least. Can I ask you a question here? It's just kind of off the wall, but still relates, because I'm just curious about what you did when you became a wildlife ranger. Now I can understand why you did. I mean, you grew up in the woods, and the outdoors were just second nature to you. When you went through your training as a young man, did they ever discuss anything like Bigfoot or other types of creatures that you might come across?
No, never did. Never did. And I always kept my mouth shut. I didn't say anything. I seen where I was raised there, they wasn't street lights or anything. I mean, when it got dark, it's dark. Houses wasn't close together. But I was coming home from the movies one night. Stopped over on the highway, walking by myself, and looking over toward my granddad and grandmother's house. I was going to spend the night there that night. And there was a white light just falling out of the sky way up. I watched it for a while. It's coming down. And it got down over my great-grandmother's house about, 1,000 feet or so. And it made a loud pop. Pop. And there's a red light and a green light come out of that white light. It went out, and those other 2 floated down to the ground. And I had no idea what that was. I might not want to know, but I run the rest of the way home.
No kidding, I would too.
That was about 1956, I guess it's for. I went off the military when I was 17 years old. There's a lot of things happened there where I was raised. you could get some real information if you go up there and interview some of them people. They'll talk to you.
They will?
Yeah, I would.
I'd like to interview them just to see what they saw and what they thought it was, and how many times did they see things like this, from a small child on up to now.
Yeah. Oh, if somebody went with you that they knew, they'd talk to you. Yeah.
Well, what we're trying to do is just gather these encounters and stories of people, because there's not a lot of this out there just on a private, grassroots, local level. You see stuff on television, but you don't know what to believe, where I just want to talk to people that are just everyday, ordinary people that work hard, that lived in these areas for a long time. They know everybody. And just from their perspective, what did they see? What did they think it was? Did anyone else see it? And have they seen it again and again and again?
Now, most of these guys that that you can talk to, they're retired. They don't have anything to do. There's no fishing, no clothes or anything. And they get out on four-wheelers. There'll be maybe 20 couples out on four-wheelers night and day, back and forth. And they have cookouts, drink beer, just have a big time. And they're out all times of the night and day. Sometimes they're out all night. They see all this stuff.
Well, you can see it in the daytime, but if you want to see stuff moving around, nighttime, it seems like everything's coming out. Everything comes out.
Yeah. Well, it does up there. And that ain't no joke. Now, I had an incident one time, way back. A community, we called it Stringtown. A highway run up through there, and houses had built along that highway on one side of it. And they just strung out up through there. Well, something come down through there one night, killing dogs. Not everybody had a dog, or two or three. And something killed a bunch of the dogs one night coming down there. Matter of fact, it happened twice, I think, a couple of years apart. I don't know, I can't remember how many dogs they killed, but I know one man lost two, another man lost one. And whatever it was breaking their back.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask how they were killed. They broke their backs.
Yeah. Like it picked them up and had them with a nap of the neck and the tail.
Oh, wow. Well, no blood. Well, for a man could do it, but I'm sure when you start getting into your larger breed, even a medium-sized dog is a handful if it wanted you. So it had to be something strong and quick, and I mean, it sounds more like a Bigfoot type creature.
Dogs chained in the yard, chained up. Yeah, I don't know anybody that would want to go in a man's backyard and kill his dog.
No, especially at night.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is bizarre. And yeah, a man wouldn't do that just to do that. I mean, there's people out there that are up to no good, but to do that to all the neighbors' dogs, that's just bizarre. That had to be something else.
Yeah. Where I was raised is it's like a little valley, 9 miles long. And big absentee land companies own most of the land. They own 98% of the land. And there's a lot of coal mining, timbering, what have you going on in there. And I don't know what drawing them in there. I don't know. But my mama come home from church one night. She lived right close to where we seen that cloud come across that ridge. She come home from church, and she said it sounded like a bunch of apes, monkeys, back in behind the house up in the woods.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just like a zoo.
Yeah. She said they was really cutting up. She went in the house, and she didn't, she couldn't hear them anymore. But if it was almost a straight line to where that one walked by me one time. I was sitting back in that stump. It's almost a straight line. It was like, hey, it's a travel route or something. I don't know.
May have been. That's an interesting, there's a lot of questions about, because no one, I would say, is an expert regarding what the Bigfoot will do and how they'll do it and when. Sometimes I kind of, even though they're a very smart being, I classify them like they're not human, obviously, but they are smart. They have probably travel patterns or routes they take, and they're sometimes can be seasonal depending on if berries are in bloom or whatever, but they're going to be in areas that are thickly covered with water available close by, and they'll make themselves known if they want to be known, and they're opportunistic. If they don't have to work so hard and they can go grab a handful of chicken feed and they know where to go, then they'll probably do that.
He's eating more than a handful at the time. He's eating about a gallon of it at the time.
Wow.
By the lake here, we check his apple trees and look good. And he's going to pick them next day. Went back next morning with a damn apple nowhere.
Good night. I wonder if he had.
Yep.
I wonder if he had a bellyache after that.
I don't know.
Well, I've heard that they love apples and pears, especially apples.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
They're trying to discourage us from hearing them. We just can't do it. Well, lights kind of keeps it away, but every now and then it'll slip in, bang on the house, and gone. Can't ever catch it. I come close that one night, but it kept that tree between me and it. I just couldn't move fast enough.
Oh yeah. These things are just super, super quick, and they're smart. I mean, I don't know. There's one thing. No one really knows how smart they are, but I'll say this. They seem like they'll let you know if they want you to see them. They know you're in the woods before you even get in the woods. And
yeah.
They know how to navigate the terrain so well. That's what amazes me.
Well, it's unreal. I mean, there's certain places, and I tell you what, we've had a lot of deer around here. Here lately, you can't see one. I mean, they'd be here. We've had them in the yard and everywhere. We can't see no deer anymore.
Well,
what part of Oklahoma are you from?
Well, I'm out of Tulsa right now, but my brothers and I grew up in kind of about 45 minutes to an hour from here, and I just say it's kind of green country is what they call it here. We got a lot of rivers and lakes in this area. But I grew up outside of a small town of Braggs, Oklahoma, and we grew up in the sticks. We have the sand hills and not a lot of mountains, but there's some beautiful land and country, where you do have some rocky outcrops and some clear lakes, but it's a lot different than western Oklahoma, where you have more of the red clay and the soil and the kind of rolling hills, and then you get out in the panhandle of Oklahoma, and it's definitely just kind of a gentle rolling hill, and you have some caverns and crevices out there with gyp hills, and there's not much pretty out there. You got a lot of tumbleweeds and sage and blackjack kind of in small little ravines, but mainly my dad was in the Park Service. He started out as a state park ranger, and then he went to as a superintendent. And so we went from Greenleaf State Park, not too far from here, near Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And in fact, Greenleaf, Braggs, Oklahoma, is near Camp Gruber. And that's where the Hurricane Katrina refugees went, where they housed them for a while. So we lived, that's where he started, and then he got reassigned in western Oklahoma near a town called Wanoka. And it's called Little Sahara, and it's basically a little Sahara. It's just sand dunes, and it's right next to the Cimarron River. It's off of 281. And then from there, he stayed there 2 years, and then we went to another state park, and it's near a smaller town of Watonga, Oklahoma, and it's called Roman Nose State Park. And that's a real pretty park. It's all located in a huge canyon and flat mesa tops, Jip Hills, and underground springs. It's a real pretty park, and we stayed there till he retired.
I was in the Marines with from Indian from Pawhuska.
Oh yeah, know where it's at. It's just Pawhuska's not that far. It's a little north of us.
His daddy is well off, and he didn't want his son raised around he sent him to the reservation to live with his granddad. He wanted his granddad to kind of raise him in the old way, and hell, he taught him good. He was a pretty bad guy.
Yeah. A lot of there's some interesting towns in every state. A lot of history out here, and just like there is in Kentucky and Tennessee, a lot of history here in Oklahoma. Where some of the towns are really neat to go through, and I just like going to these smaller towns and going to a cafe, the local cafe, and just hearing people talk and some of the stories and the farmers and ranchers.
Well, where I was raised, now there's no restaurants. There's not anything. Just barely a little old bitty, dirty, they call it grocery store, I guess. I don't know. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
The industry's all gone. The coal's gone. There was a coal company there that worked about 400 men one time. We had, my mother had a grocery store. My grandfather on my dad's side had a grocery store. There was 2 restaurants. There was a dry cleaner. Hell, I don't know. We had a big movie theater. All of them back in the early 50s, all of the big country music people come through there. Shows.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Cash.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Carter. Hank Williams was in that old theater. He put on a show. Yeah. There's a lot of times. I remember when I was about 2nd grade, Lash Little Brew come by our school and put on a show up in that theater. He come visited over school. Red Ryder and Little Beaver come through there one time.
Oh, wow.
This one man owned a string of theaters. He owned about 15. And he had somebody about every weekend come through there, put on shows. But there's nothing there now. Not playing. Just hard to believe.
That is. That's a lot of these small towns. You know, even the small town where my dad retired from. I mean, they had a creamery, they had a couple of soda companies there, they had like 3 or 4 movie theaters. It went on and on. I mean, for a smaller town, that wasn't bad, but now it's all gone. There's just, unless you're a veterinarian, or you have a gas station, some type of, you work at the co-op or something like that, or it's just the smaller towns are getting smaller.
Yeah, they are. And that one where I was raised, it's gone. It's gone. We had a high school. The miners were cut $2 a payday to keep up the school, to buy the books and what have you. And if your dad worked in the coal mines, you didn't have to buy books or anything. They bought all the athletic equipment, done it all. Had a big company store, had a big restaurant, had doctors there, service station. They had everything.
That's amazing. I miss those. I wasn't around so much. I was at the tail end. I was born in 1966, and I remember in Braggs, that's where, we lived about 5 miles. We were in the state park, but we lived about 5 miles. And I remember actually going to get, it cost me, I think, 25 cents. And I remember going to a little, it was kind of like a hardware, but grocery store. It was like a modern day Walmart, but on a much smaller version. And I would go grab a Coke that was in the cold water. You'd lift up the Coca-Cola, that insulated cooler, and they were just sitting in there in water. And I didn't know any different. That's the way, but I didn't realize at that time, that kind of cooler was vintage. It was so neat to me. And when I started seeing cans, coming out of machines rather than the way I was used to in this town, it's like time stood still. And the butcher had a butcher block, and it was a real butcher block. And the post office was about the size of a small storage house. I mean, it wasn't nothing, but it was really neat to grow up in that time period.
I was born in 1941, and seen a lot of change.
I'd like to say it change is good, and some of it is, but golly, some of it's not. Some of it I just can't explain anymore. It's so bizarre. It's gotten so bizarre.
Well, it really has, and I just can't comprehend. I told a friend the other night went out for supper, my wife and us, we went out for supper, and I told him, I said, well, my hard drive's full. I don't want to know nothing else. I don't want to meet nobody new. I'm full up. I just don't want to be bothered.
I don't blame you a bit. I've got a lot of good friends, and one of my friends lives. He went off the grid a couple years ago, about 10 years ago, and him and his family, and he's actually an engine fabricator, designer. He's an old school motorcycle builder, but he can build literally anything, whether it's solar, wind generated, wind powered. He does it all. And he's just from old school, and we're about the same age. And he just tells me sometime, he lives out in the woods. He says, he said, Lance, I'm just having a hard time even to drive in town just to get gas. He goes, the traffic gets congested. People are in such a hurry to do something. They about wreck trying to get around you in traffic. They're honking horns. He goes, I hate going to the city.
Oh, I don't drive on interstates anymore. There's too much going on. Where we're at here, you've got coming right straight up out of Florida through Georgia, through Atlanta, right on up, all the way into Michigan, into Canada. Interstate 75, and I just don't like it. I don't drive on it.
Well, before we get off here, is there any other interesting accounts, anything you want to add to, while you were a ranger, or anything you thought was unusual that you heard someone say, or anything like that?
Well, there's one more thing. Two friends and me was going coon hunting, and I had two red-boned hounds. They wasn't afraid of anything hardly. We were going up this ridge, and they went on up ahead of us, and they come up on some of these barking at it pretty tough, what have you. But they come back to us. Not only my dogs, but my friend's dogs come back to us with their tails between their legs and wouldn't go back. And one of the guys shined a light up that way, and they seen two big yellow eyes. That's all he seen. I got no idea what it was or anything, so my dogs wouldn't fool with it. I wasn't going to fool with it. So they wasn't afraid of anything hardly.
Wow. That's something that's a commonality or a common factor I hear a lot is when someone has a dog that's will bark at at new strangers coming up, or if something's in the woods they'll bark. But sometimes when these creatures are around or something's unusual, they just will be quiet or they'll cower, especially coon dogs.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of guys that I've interviewed, and he said, I had an outstanding coon dog that I've trained ever since it was a pup, and it went back, and he said we followed something and we heard it screaming, and this coon dog come running back, got in its back of the tailgate, in its caged area, and he said that dog was ruined. It never wanted to hunt like it normally had hunted before. It wouldn't get out. It cowered. He goes, it just ruined that coon dog. He said, something happened. I don't know what it was. He said, but when I heard that screaming back there, he says, I knew that wasn't a mountain lion or a raccoon.
Yeah. Her sure run back to us that night. They wouldn't go back up that way. They wouldn't go, I wasn't going.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's, well, I really, really appreciate the opportunity in chatting with you, sir. I really do. I'm so glad that your son contacted us, and he basically said, you need to talk to my dad. He's got a lot of interesting stories and accounts that's happened to him and others, and he is a retired game warden, and you just got to talk to him. So I'm so thankful I did. I really appreciate your time.
Well, if you ever take a notion you'd want to go up in Kentucky where all that takes place, give me a call. I'll go with you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I would love that. Absolutely. I tell you what, we want to start doing this more full time, where we just go out. We're just trying to document people's accounts and stories from a local level, and just to understand, I just like meeting people, and there's something special when you can talk to the person that grew up in an area for years and years, and they know everybody, and they know the woods, and they know, that's just very familiar, and then they can tell you a story. It just comes out, and it's amazing, what they say and what they thought it was and what happened in their own words. It's incredible. So that would be great.
There's a lot of tales up there. These are not just young people. There's people up there my age. They ride them four-wheelers. They're gone in the mountains all the time. It's just, they can tell you some stuff. They've told me quite a bit.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I ever get that opportunity here this year especially, I will definitely give you a call, and I'd love to meet you, and I'd love to meet these good folks in that area.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
They're all
again
right.
so much. I really, really appreciate it, sir, and you have a wonderful evening. And if you hear of anything or come across anything, your boy's got my number. You can call anytime.
All right.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
You take
it.
care.
You too. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.